Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by these great sponsors. Axon started out of a passion for keeping agriculture moving. Imagine having 100 years of tire and wheel knowledge in your back pocket the next time you sell a piece of ag equipment. To find more or become an Axon dealer, please visit axontire.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Valley Transportation. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransinc.com for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. This podcast is also brought to you by Ag Direct. No matter how you buy your ag equipment, from a dealer, auction, or a private party, Ag Direct can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving Iron.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast. Markets with Shawn Hackett. This edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Axon Tire, helping dealers move more iron for the past 100 years. For more information, go to axontire.com. If you're interested in a free pocket knife, you might need one down there, Shawn, to fight off all those alligators. If you want one of those, send an email to marketing@axontire.com and you can get a free pocket knife sent up to you. Just send your details and tell them the Moving Iron Podcast sent you to marketing@axontire.com. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransinc.com for all your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. And no matter how you buy your ag equipment, from a dealer, an auction, or a private party, Ag Direct can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com. Well, Shawn, it's the much anticipated Q&A with Shawn Hackett Thursday, and I think I should get together like some kind of a sounder here with like He Wants to Be a Millionaire type music or something like that. That way.
Just let you know, I did use my pocket knife to cut my lemon this morning.
There you go. Right on. Yeah. There you go. So look, it's multi-use. It's more than just anything. You can cut lemons and limes and all kinds of tropical citrus fruits. There you go. Look at that. It works. All right. Well, before we get to the Q&A part, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the marketplace. Wheat, just like you talked about Tuesday, you're like, I think today is the day that, we start seeing everything go backwards, and it's been going backwards since. So wheat was limit down for the last 2 days. Haven't seen where it's at this morning, but it started out down overnight. Corn, beans, oil, you name it. It's all going backwards right now, Shawn. So looks like maybe some of that correction you were talking about on Tuesday is starting to take place.
You can't keep emotions running that high for very long. It just never can continue that way. $13 wheat was pricing in no supplies at all out of Ukraine for the next 12 months. And while no one can know exactly what's going to happen, I don't believe that's going to turn out to be the case. I think some supplies will come out of Ukraine. And if some supplies come out of Ukraine, then $13 wheat is overvalued. It's just, all else being equal. Of course, we could have weather problems and, something could come up later in the year that could create a reason for wheat to go higher. But based upon this event alone, I think we priced it all in at $13 wheat. Now, soybeans never had a reason to go higher. So, outside of sunflower oil competing with bean oil, which is a stretch, there was no reason for soybeans to go higher. And the reality with corn is, it seems to me what we've done with the corn price, we're probably going to increase our planted acres in other areas of the world now and add extra acres and add extra production potential that could easily make up a lot of what is expected not to come out of Ukraine, even if they don't plant the crop or they only plant half a crop or whatever they do. So I just think the market overreacted. And even for crude oil, for example, everyone worried that Russia, that the U.S. is not buying their oil from Russia anymore, which is 3%, by the way, of our supply. Didn't say Russia was going to sell to the Chinese. They are.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So if they sell 3% to the Chinese that we don't buy, That means the Chinese don't buy at 3% from the Middle East, which means the Middle East have 3% more to sell to us.
Right.
Which means, has anything really changed in the crude oil market? No.
No. Right.
So once again, I think the market, I'm not saying that it's not a serious situation. I'm not saying that the market had no reason to react. And I'm not saying I know how this is all going to turn out, but I do believe that the fever pitch of $130 barrel oil with what we know today, and $13 wheat was an extreme bullish psychological price point that in order for us to exceed that, Casey, we would really, really need a situation in Ukraine to unravel to something far greater, meaning including something other than Ukraine, some kind of maybe a regional war, a world war, something involving European countries. It would have, China getting involved in the mix, maybe China going into Taiwan. I mean, something would have to expand beyond the scope of Ukraine, in my view, for those kind of price levels to have a basis for being exceeded, and maybe all that is going to happen, Casey. I don't know the future of those kind of things more than anybody else, but I do think it's going to be pretty hard to get back there without a real significant major escalation of the current situation. I think right now it's going to be de-escalating for a while. The de-escalation part may come later in the year. I think when I'm thinking through, this is just me speaking as trying to think logically. Russia wants the wheat. Russia wants the corn. Ukraine wants the wheat. Ukraine wants the corn. China wants the wheat. China wants the corn. So every player involved in this mess want this production. I think they're going to find a way to at least provide the conditions where the ag industry can operate enough that those supplies aren't a zero. That's my bet and my gamble at this point.
Okay, that's good analysis there. All right, let's jump in. It's a good segue into the first question that we have here, and this question is from at the Corn Guy on Twitter, Dan Lewis. And so if you want to check that out, go check him out. You got good stuff there. His question is long time listener, first time question. My question is, if Ukraine gets something planted, South America has a good crop, and the U.S. has a good crop, where do you see December 22 corn at harvest? $5 a bushel, plus or minus that, and then also kind of a follow-up to that. In the flip side of that, if Ukraine doesn't get a crop in, or South America has something pop up, or the U.S. has something pop up, where do you see corn in December?
Well, we did an analysis, Casey, on what a blow-off top in corn could look like. Meaning, we just went back to all the blow-off tops in corn since 1970, and we just ran some statistics. This is not a forecast. This is just statistics of what has the corn market done before. So if everything goes wrong, which is what this person's asking, what does the historical trading of corn suspect could happen? It says we could have a $10 corn price. That's what an overshoot or a blow-off top could look like. We ran the same analysis, Casey, in the wheat market, and we said 12 to 14 based upon 50 years of trading would be consistent with how blow-off tops have ended in the wheat market, and we got to 13 and we topped. Mm-hmm. So does it mean we can't rewrite the rules? Of course we could. Does it mean we can't do something we've never done before? Of course we could. But that is always our best way to look at where could the upside be, and it would suggest something like $10, $11 corn market. If everything goes wrong, we blow our top off, and we have panic in the streets. Historical overshoots in corn would suggest that's possible on a very, very short-term basis. But a lot of things would have to go wrong, Casey, for that to occur. A lot of things would have to go wrong. And I'm specifically talking about, like new crop corn at this point, $6.40 or $6.50, $6.30, wherever it is today. I'm talking about the new crop corn prices. And your gentleman is asking for the new crop corn price because he's asking about when production's good. Yep. For the new crop corn price to get to 10, 12, a lot of we have to have a really bad crop in the U.S. We are not forecasting for that. We think the U.S. can have a pretty good crop. We think it's going to become a tough start to the crop, as we've been talking about. We think we're going to have a very strong finish. La Nina is rapidly disappearing. A more El Nino pattern is coming. Very, very good weather coming for the next few years in the U.S. Very, very good weather coming for South America in the next few years, and this tends to allow for production to rebound for a little while, Casey. And everywhere I look, I mean, maybe it's just me, but I don't see a whole lot of hogs in the U.S. I don't see a whole lot of cattle in the U.S. I don't see a lot of hogs anywhere in the world. I don't see a lot of cattle anywhere in the world. Meaning our animal feeding units are not good, and with the current environment of these high feed prices and some of these remaining issues with the La Nina, I don't see where the demand for feed's going to come from to drive prices higher without significant production issues. Meaning that the demand side issue has to be remedied, and you remedy a demand problem by getting cheap feed again, and allowing those livestock producers to feel good again, and getting them to get that profit margin again, where they say, you know what, I can get cheap corn, I can get cheap bean meal for the next year or two. I'm feeling good. Let's fire things up. Let's get the fertility cycle going. Let's start, growing the herd size again. But the only way you're going to do that is you got to get the feed price down. So.
Gotcha. All right. Well, thanks, Dan. If you guys are interested in asking Shawn a question, make sure you email me at MovingIronPodcast at MovingIronPodcast.com. Got one more question here from Mike Sharmel, and his question is, so we talk a lot about weather on here, so this is what his question is coming from. It says, Shawn, from your weather research, will drought continue to intensify? Will it continue, and then will it also intensify in the southern plains?
No. We don't believe this is a drought escalation year. We're talking about the grain belt. We're talking about, let's say, western grain belt, to the eastern grain belt, that swath. No, we don't believe we're going to be dealing with an escalating drought. We think we're going to be dealing with better conditions. Remember, we're not going to be in El Nino this summer, Casey. So this is not going to be in El Nino summer where we have just fantastic greenhouse conditions,
right.
Record. We're not saying that. Relative to last year, which I think the question is asked, relative to last year, we think especially the western grain belt is going to be cooler. Doesn't mean cooler than normal.
Right.
It means last year I think we were 3.5 degrees above normal throughout the duration of the growing season. We think we're going to be a degree, maybe 1.5 degrees above normal, but considerably cooler than last year. Now remember, we had in many areas we had no rainfall at all, Casey, right, or almost none. So remember, if we feel that we're going to get significant increased chances for rainfall in the western corn belt, it doesn't mean we're going to get abundant rainfall. It doesn't mean we're going to have greenhouse, but we're going to have more chances for rainfall, better go of it, better conditions, better environment to grow crops than last year. So we think we're actually going to see a de-escalation of drought conditions, meaning not perfect. Yeah, some areas are still going to miss. Every year somebody misses something. If we were to kind of look at who could miss, we think Texas, West Texas, that southern area there, it might be the area that still misses it this year. Other than that, we think especially northern plains, Casey, into Canada, where that was the epicenter of the drought.
Right.
We actually think they're going to have some really good growing conditions, meaning that we think up the further north you get, it's actually going to get pretty. They could have some really, really good conditions up that way. So, does not look like a year to expect catastrophic crops. Could we be a little off from trend? Sure, but nothing that's going to allow, in our view, for a real escalation of supply worries beyond what we've already experienced. We think it's actually going to be the opposite. Now, are we going to get a weather scare? We always get a weather scare.
Right. Exactly.
It's always too hot. It's too dry. It's too something. I mean, I'm not saying we're not going to have a weather scare. I'm absolutely going to have a weather scare. Mm-hmm. But is the weather scare actually going to mean a actual real crop problem? We don't believe that's going to be the case this year. We think we're going to have a very challenging beginning, and we think we're going to have a rough start. If we were thinking about where we could have that weather scare, we think it could be in the first third of the growing season. But we think July and especially August, we think we're going to have a really strong finish, and we're going to be dialing in some larger crops. And then, of course, when we roll into the South American growing season, we could be entering El Nino during the fall, their spring, and that would tremendously dramatically change their drought weather pattern to a really, really healthy, much more supportive, weather cycle for growing some big crops in South America that they have not had in a couple of years. So the cycle is saying, that we should be looking for better crops in North and South America, and that means that bigger supplies are going to come at a time when our demand is just not going to be there to absorb it, which means we're going to have prices come down unless, we have some kind of a geopolitical thing that takes over the normal weather cycles that we're dealing with here. So,
right on. Well, thanks, Mike. Appreciate the question. Again, if anybody has a question for Shawn on Thursday, send me an email at MovingIronPodcast at MovingIronPodcast.com, or you can just, hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at MovingIron LLC, and give me your question there, and I'll make sure it gets read. So, one question I have, I've been thinking about this. So, with going into an El Nino cycle, and then you were talking the other day about the northern Atlantic getting cooler. What's that called? Oscillation? What's it called?
Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, AMO.
Yes, see, I was right there. I listen to what you say, Shawn. I take notes. All right, so with that happening, and then we're going to have, obviously, more opportunity for moisture, are you looking at more, as we move into, like you talked about, early spring, late winter, those kind of things, seeing a lot more of that blizzard-type action happening to where we could see some late season snows?
When the Atlantic Ocean gets into the cooling phase where it's actually below normal, which we believe we've begun. I mean, the North Atlantic is still pile driving down, by the way.
Yep.
And now the AMO is pile driving down. The last time we flipped was 1962, and the period from 1962 to 1982 was a period where the AMO was in the cold phase, meaning the sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic were colder, and that was a period. The way the teleconnections of the AMO work, when it's warmer than normal, it helps produce more of a drought pattern in North America. Not every year, but generally it's a drier pattern. When it gets cooler, when you get a cooler Atlantic sea surface temperature regime, it promotes less drought, more moisture in general. That means more opportunity for bigger snowstorms, bigger winter storms. It's also a colder pattern for the U.S., meaning that the air temperatures tend to cool significantly during a period where the Atlantic is colder than normal versus when it's warmer than normal. So that means, longer winters in general, colder winters in general, shorter summers in general. Doesn't mean you can't have a hot summer. We're talking about longer term trends here, but it means you're going to be dealing with a cooler, wetter pattern. And what's interesting, everyone always fears the hot, dry cycle, right? But when you look at the yields in the U.S., our worst period for yield was from 1965 to 1982 in terms of being able to grow yields in the U.S. because of this cold, wet pattern. And then when we got into the drought cycle, our yields have been going through the roof outside of a few times when we get the drought to be too bad, meaning that we actually can grow pretty good crops in hot, dry weather. If it's not, if it's not on 1 in 100 year drought like 2012, we actually do really, really well. The technology we have, the seed technology we have, the precision farming we have, we could get by growing good crops in warm, dry weather. We do not know how to grow good crops in colder, wetter weather, and we've already seen a lot of difficulty around the world when we've had colder, wetter weather that we're not able to grow good crops. So now, it doesn't mean we can't do it. Doesn't mean we can't find a way to do it. Doesn't mean technology can't come to the rescue. But we've not spent any money on how to grow good crops in cold, wet conditions. We've only focused on hot, dry, because that's the weather pattern we've been in since the AMO went warm in 1982. So it typically takes a decade before technology and investment in technology that identifies a problem gets its hands around it and can start solving that problem. And that's why we continue to believe this next decade is going to be the bigger risks in agriculture are going to be to the upside in production shortfalls and in price upside volatility. Like I said, doesn't mean there's not going to be downside, but we see some downside coming, okay? But overall, we're looking at a more upside risk volatility cycle until technology figures out how can we grow crops in colder, wetter weather and shorter growing cycles. And that AMO flipping is part of the 60-year cycle that we've been talking about for a long time and the 40-year cycle that we've been talking for a long time, and it's now really starting to verify, and it's a very important natural climate cycle that we've been focused on that is part of our longer-term view here on what's going on with climate, weather, these cycles. The thing that I want to really emphasize, and I know we've talked about this before, but it's really important to emphasize, the period from 1962 to 1982, which was a major global cooling cycle, and actually led to a ice age fear cycle in 1970s, did not have a grand solar cycle to accompany it, meaning we didn't have the sun going quiet. We have the sun going quiet now, which adds an additional element. So these two coming together we have not seen that happen since 1600. And lastly, the other side of the pond is the Pacific Ocean. It's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, by the PDO, moved into the cold phase a decade ago, meaning that ocean's already been cold already. Now those oceans have different cycles, but every 60 years there's a 15-year period where the AMO and the PDO are cold simultaneously. Both oceans are cold. Remember, sea surface temperatures control the ambient temperature above, not the other way around. So when they both go into the cold phase, it adds an additional cold element into the equation. The last time we had the AMO and the PDO in the cold phase, it was 1965 to 1980. So all these cycles are suggesting that the weather as we have known it is going to turn upside down. Growing food the way we've known it is going to be turned upside down. And the way we market our crops, the way we produce our crops, the technology that's required to produce our crops, the ground that actually can produce our crops, and the kind of crops that we can grow, short duration versus long duration, oats versus corn, it's really going to have to be thought about and changed. And the infrastructure that I think we're going to need to store the excess of grain into good years so that we can get through the bad years, I think all of this is going to have to be rethought about and shifted. And that's the process I think we began a couple of years ago when we began this cycle. And so far, if you look at the last years, we've had a heck of a hard time growing production around the world. Almost everywhere you look, we've been under yield pressure. And I think that's going to be a theme that's going to continue to show up as we go further on into this cycle. I know it was a long-winded discussion, and I know we've talked about this before, but I think sometimes it helps to repeat, what the long-term trends are here with all of this stuff. So.
That was going to be my next question anyway, was, how does the solar cycle play into all this too? And, like you said, we've talked about it a million times. We had Dr. Zarkova on, and she gave us her analysis of what was there. But it is important to understand that.
And remember, what all these cycles do is it impacts the upper airflow. And so the jet stream, instead of being this beautiful sine wave zonal flow, it becomes this very undulating, amplified, snake-like, meridional upper airflow jet stream. And then that just totally increases these weather extremes, this weather volatility, and then it allows that Arctic polar vortex we've talked about, the destabilization of polar vortex to occur on a much more regular basis and bring that air down and cause all kinds of havoc with weather volatility around the world. And that is, in fact, absolutely positively happening, and clearly happening more frequently. We are currently in a sudden stratospheric warming event that just completed. The polar vortex is completely destabilized. It's all showing up. The frost in Brazil last year. These are things that we haven't seen happen in a very long time that are now starting to happen. And I think that's what seems to be a 1 in 100 year weather events can become more common once we get to the next, over the next decade. We're going to look back and say, well, that actually is more. Now we should expect those weather events more often than this is the only time we're going to see it for 100 years. You know what I'm saying?
Right on. Yeah, it's something to pay attention to, something to really be excited to see happen. I'm not excited to see less crops being grown, but excited to see this happen.
And I will emphasize that even though El Nino is a better pattern for growing grains, remember, it's still going to be amplified. So think of the last El Nino pattern. In 2019, we had the ridiculous rains here in the U.S.
Yep.
We had the ridiculous rains in China. Great. So the issue with El Nino, even though it's a better pattern, we still would rather have, more abundant rainfall overall, but is the flooding problem. Too much rain. And the areas that get stuck in the stagnant pattern, rain is good, but no, it's not good if you're riding your boat across your crop.
That's a bad thing. Yeah.
And so that's going to be the risk. And even in El Nino, and even though we're going to have better production in El Nino years than not, it still means that the production potential is going to be off from what you would normally have expected. So let's just say that if you would have expected in the past 30 years weather pattern that in El Nino, corn could have a 186 yield potential in 2023. Let's just say based upon, we would expect to blow out the record yields like by an order of magnitude, and we would bury the corn market for 5 years, oversupply, game over, bear market. I'm suggesting is, that potential's off the table because of excessive rainfall and weather and extreme weather, that maybe we're going to just get the trend line, maybe just slightly above trend line. Still good crops, by the way, but not the crazy, unimaginable bin buster above trend line yields that's buried the corn market or the grain markets in years past. I don't believe that's on the docket. I think we're going back to good crops, but not great crops in the El Nino cycle, and that is something that's also allows the net La Nina El Nino yield adjustment to come down on an average basis. So
right on. Hey, good stuff as usual, Shawn. Man, there's a lot of good information in this one. If folks want to reach out to you and get more information about what you're doing at Hackett Financial, what's the best way to do that?
Our website is Hackett, Hackett, advisors.com. We talk about these weather cycles on some of our sample reports. We have interviews, white papers to get everyone knowledgeable of what we do to see if what we do could be of value for your listeners.
Right on. And if you have questions for Shawn, make sure you send those in to me at Moving Iron Podcast at MovingIronPodcast.com, or just hit me up on any of the social media stuff at Moving Iron LLC, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or even LinkedIn. So check that out there. Shawn, appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
Thanks, Casey. Always appreciate it.
Right on. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Go to MovingIronLLC.com for everything Moving Iron related. Also get all the information for the Moving Iron Summit coming up here in Nashville, Tennessee, September 6th, 7th, and 8th. Shawn will be there talking about this very same stuff. So with that, I am Casey Seymour, Shawn Hackett. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out. Axon Tire is going to have more tips, tricks, and client advice throughout the year and in September at the Moving Iron Summit in Nashville. If you're looking to sign up for the event, please head over to MovingIronLLC.com. We hope to see you there. Valley Transportation has been hauling ag and construction equipment across the country for the past 33 years. Call Parker at 800-657-4910 or go to valleytransitinc.com for all of your trucking needs. At Valley Transportation, our goal is to help you reach yours. And no matter how you buy ag equipment from a dealer, auction, or a private party, AgDirect can help you finance it. You can even apply online at agdirect.com. Learn more about your financing options at agdirect.com.
Moving iron in the 21st century.